For 30 seconds, imagine this. You've lost almost everything. Your savings are gone. Your past won't let you sleep. The only thing you still trust in this world is the loyal dog sitting beside you. Then one cold morning, you spend your last $450 on a collapsing building in the mountains, just to have a roof over your head before winter closes in. But what if that broken building wasn't empty? What if your dog suddenly stopped, stared at a wall, and uncovered a secret hidden there for nearly a century? A secret powerful enough to change your life forever. That's exactly what happened to Noah Carver. Snow drifted across the Bitterroot Mountains like gray ash falling from the sky. The flakes clung to the rusted hood of Noah's battered pickup as it crawled up the narrow mountain road. His hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, the skin across his knuckles dry and cracked from cold and hard years. In the passenger seat sat Shadow. The retired military working dog didn't move. His posture was tall, calm, and disciplined even after years away from the battlefield. His amber eyes stayed locked on Noah's face, studying him the way only a partner who had once trusted him with life and death could. When the truck crested the final hill, the sawmill came into view. It stood in the valley below like the skeleton of a forgotten giant. Gray wood beams sagged under decades of weather, and rusted metal machinery clung to its frame like scars from another era. Half the roof leaned dangerously toward the ground, while most of the windows had long since shattered. The place didn't look abandoned. It looked warned against. Noah exhaled slowly and muttered, "Well, buddy, this is home now." The truck rolled into the gravel yard and came to a stop. The crunch of tires echoed across the empty property before being swallowed by the mountain wind. The moment Noah opened the door, icy air cut through his jacket and settled into the old injuries hidden beneath it. Shadow jumped down from the seat beside him, landing lightly despite the stiffness creeping into his aging joints. They both stared up at the sawmill. 3 stories tall. 3 stories of a past nobody wanted anymore. A faded wooden sign still clung to the front wall, barely readable beneath decades of storms. Boone Lumber Company. The letters had nearly vanished. Rusted gears hung beneath the roofline like forgotten decorations. When Noah stepped onto the wooden porch, the boards groaned under his weight. In his pocket, he held the only key, a bent piece of metal the county clerk had slid across the counter earlier that week. The clerk had looked at him with pity when he bought the property. $450. That was every cent Noah had left. He hadn't bought the mill because it was valuable. He bought it because winter was coming, and he needed somewhere to sleep. Shadow sniffed near the doorway, ears twitching. Noah heard it too. Tiny metallic clicks from deep inside the building. Old beams shifting. The hollow breath of a structure that had once been alive with work. He pushed the door open. Cold air poured out like something trapped inside had just been released. Dust drifted through thin sunlight that squeezed through broken windows. The enormous main floor stretched into darkness. Rusted conveyor belts. Collapsed support beams. Mountains of hardened sawdust that had turned into stone over time. The place smelled like iron, oil, and memories that belonged to someone else. Shadow stepped inside first, nose sweeping across the floor. Noah trusted that instinct more than any weapon he had ever carried. If Shadow walked forward, it meant the place was safe enough. At least for now. Noah scanned the ceiling beams and shadows overhead. Years earlier in combat zones, he had learned the difference between silence and danger. This place carried the kind of silence that made your nerves tighten. The kind you never completely trusted. His chest tightened slightly. Not fear exactly, just an echo of it. A memory disguised as a heartbeat. He rubbed his chest and forced himself to breathe. Shadow returned and leaned gently against his leg, grounding him. "Yeah," Noah murmured quietly. "I'm good." He wasn't. But the reassurance wasn't for himself. It was for the dog. They walked deeper into the building. Loose planks cracked beneath their boots, and the echoes rippled across the empty interior like whispers moving through the dark. Dust marked every step Noah took. The first footprints the place had seen in who knew how many years. At the far end of the main floor, a crooked staircase leaned against the wall. Noah pressed down on the first step. It creaked loudly, but held. Shadow followed behind him, claws tapping softly against the old wood. Upstairs felt colder. The second floor held a row of offices connected by a narrow hallway. Doors hung unevenly on rusted hinges. Noah picked the last office at the end. It had one window that hadn't shattered yet. Weak daylight spilled across the floor. It wasn't much, but it wasn't the truck bed either. He dropped his backpack in the corner and unrolled a sleeping bag across the least damaged section of the floor. Tonight, he would sleep here, or at least try. Shadow slowly walked the perimeter of the room, sniffing each wall with professional focus. Noah gave a tired smile. Check the perimeter, huh? Standard procedure. Then the dog stopped, his body locked stiff, ears straight, tail frozen. He stared at one section of the wooden wall beside Noah. Nothing about the wall looked unusual, just the same timber panels covering every surface of the office. But Shadow stood there like something on the other side was watching them. Noah frowned. "What is it, boy?" Shadow didn't blink. Outside, a gust of wind slammed into the sawmill. The vibration of the old structure triggered a memory inside Noah's mind, one he wished would stay buried. A bunker door, a pressure plate, a warning he almost missed years ago. Shadow had saved him that day, too. Noah swallowed. "Buddy," he whispered quietly, staring at the motionless dog. "What do you see?" Shadow's ears twitched. Somewhere deep inside the mill, something shifted. Wood scraped softly against wood. Not loud, but intentional. The hair along Noah's arms lifted instantly. The building wasn't empty, and Shadow knew it. Noah took a slow breath. "All right," he said quietly. "We'll figure it out, one step at a time." Shadow looked back at him, steady and calm, as if to say, "We've survived worse." Outside, snow continued falling across the mountains, settling quietly over the roof of a place that had waited decades for someone to return. And at last someone had. The temperature inside the sawmill dropped as afternoon faded into evening. The mountain air slipped through every crack in the old structure, turning the second-floor office into something closer to an icebox than a shelter. Noah rubbed his hands together, watching his breath drift through the dim light. The building creaked slowly around them. Not sharp noises, not sudden ones, just the long, tired groans of wood settling after decades of neglect. Every beam sounded like it was remembering the weight it used to carry. Shadow stood in the middle of the room, muscles tight beneath his thick coat. His eyes were still fixed on that same stretch of wooden wall. Noah knelt beside him and ran a hand along the dog's back. "Easy, boy," he said softly. "It's just us." But Shadow didn't relax. His ears stayed upright. Every instinct pointed toward that one silent panel of timber. Noah stood up slowly and forced himself to breathe deeper. Years earlier, he had learned how to bury fear beneath routine. So he reached for his flashlight. The beam cut through the dusty air, sweeping across the corners of the room. Tiny specks floated like ghosts inside the light. "Come on," Noah murmured. "Let's check the rest of the place before it gets dark." Shadow hesitated for a moment, then followed. But he walked behind Noah now, and he kept Noah between himself and that wall, as if he refused to turn his back on it. They moved down the crooked staircase again, boots thudding quietly on the worn steps. The deeper they went, the colder the air became, until Noah could feel the chill creeping into his bones. The main floor looked even larger in the fading light. The massive room could have held 3 semi-trucks side by side. Thick beams stretched high into darkness above them, disappearing into shadows where the ceiling should have been visible. Rust coated the giant saw blades hanging along the walls. It looked almost like dried blood. Conveyor belts sagged under layers of dust. Piles of sawdust had hardened into uneven mounds across the floor like forgotten graves. And everywhere, echoes, small ones, big ones, the kind that made a person feel watched even when they were alone. Noah increased the brightness on his flashlight. "Reminds me of forward operating base Holston," he muttered quietly.